I learned how to advise someone in the way to throw the shot put or javelin. The other situation I think that was impressive was that the school had a great deal of not only camaraderie but support of the teams, the newspapers. We had our own newspaper at school. By the way, at that time it cost 50 cents to see the Giants play if you bought a ticket at the school. It's an interesting cost of seeing the Giants play at that time. And so from the community, it became a community of the local high school. We also had a community of the local parish. Father John Keene, who was a great priest down at St. Francis Xavier. And up in Holy Name, there was a whole group of priests that were very active, as well as his Varian brothers, in the area of sports and activities with the kids. So there was a sense of feeling, a sense of family. Seldom I went out to restaurants or places like that. The family was just about making it financially. And you're in a comfort zone because everyone was similar. It was, the economic group was somewhat similar to each other. Church was important, the sports were important, and so forth. Later on, and no one ever talked to me about college. No one in elementary school and high school. Later on, I started to say, gee, I think I'd like to go to college. And I would cut the pictures out of the papers, put them on my wall in a room and so forth. That was the way you started to identify because, again, the high school scholastic coverage of our activities was very important, and it was there every day. Those men wrote columns every day. You read about it, and so it became important to you and your peers. Our rival school was Erasmus High School. The annual Erasmus game was a big thing at Eppitsfield. So all of that type of thing was very impressive to a young person who was looking for identification and support and direction. Where were you going, and that type of thing. So that as we went along through school, I started to think in terms of, gee, going to college. I like to identify with college because at that time I would read the papers, magazines, and start to find out. I guess that's how you get to college. You play sports. We didn't have a guidance department to the point where they took you aside, as we do now in most schools, where to direct. They give children much more direction today, really good professional direction. At that particular time, it was just quite different. It wasn't that the structure that you have today for schools and kids going in direction. So I started to ask myself those questions. So why are those kids going to school and no one's talking to me or about school? How do you get there? What do these people do? So I said, well, sports must be getting on somewhere or other. No one's recruiting me. They don't recruit 165-pound fullbacks or centers. So that the situation is, as I started to look into our community, as I looked into our elementary school as well as our high schools, I didn't have a sense of someone looking at me and saying, look, maybe you should think of going on to school and college. The family did not have the money to support that. The family did not have really the knowledge of it. They didn't say, look, let's think about City University or the local colleges that we had, Fordham or whatever. And so as I just found a void there. I was looking for a direction. I didn't get any. So but I knew it was not right. I knew that a lot of these talented young men and women should be getting direction, should be going on to something and that type of thing. So that the direction of the Irish immigrant family, as well as other immigrant families, was to go civil service. Got a civil service job. You're in the 30s, get a civil service job. Well, I was going to be too good because since I wore glasses and had a vision problem, the police and fire were out. I wasn't going to get that. So you were looking around for other jobs. But the situation was that in terms of going to college right away, that didn't plan out because I didn't have direction on it. I knew I should be going in that direction or could go in that direction to enjoy the whole area of sports, but I didn't have that particular background. So I became a machinist, and I worked as a machinist for 3 years. At the end of that particular time, I got drafted into the service, and 2 years later, fortunately, after the Korean conflict and so forth, we had the GI Bill, and the GI Bill afforded immigrant families the opportunity to send their kids to college. At that time, I got married to Mary, and also coming from an immigrant family with 6 children, and also did not have the solid direction for college, so that they were very, very good secretaries. Mary had 3 years of Latin and all of that type of thing as a high school secretarial student. We were tracked at that time, business, general, and the academic business in general. And they were honor students in the commercial program. So as we got to that particular position where we got married, and most of our people were getting married at that time of our peer group, the GI Bill was the direction, or in the case of Frank Nastro, some of the outstanding athletes, they got scholarships. But the other group, myself included, were not good enough to get those scholarships. So I tried to figure out, how am I going to continue in this area which I enjoy, working with people, and how can I help the young people around me, like myself? And that's when I started to think in terms of coaching. I wasn't just coaching to have an outstanding team, I was coaching to impact young people like myself who did not have direction, who needed help. And so I knew that if I got into coaching and teaching, I could impact people, I could help people. And that was where I got off into that particular direction. I think that's where a lot of the immigrant families looked for help on the outside. In some cases it was there, in most cases it was not. They were out there, not abandoned, but certainly without the professionalism that would have lifted them into, as they do today, lifted them into a professional career.
Now, Coach, why St. Francis Prep in 1954? You go to NYU on the GI Bill, you're working 2 jobs, you're newly married, and in 1954, you become a coach at St. Francis Prep. Prior to 1954, St. Francis has had no success at football, with the exception of 1932, when the great coach Vince Lombardi was an all-city football player at St. Francis Prep before he went on to fame at Fordham University and Green Bay. So Coach Lombardi did very well at St. Francis. That's our 1 championship year. From 1900 to 1954, we were the doormats of New York City football. You come to St. Francis Prep in 1954. What were you passionate about at the Prep with the Franciscan Brothers, and how did you start your great legacy and your foundation of excellence and tradition?
Well, my brother went to St. Francis Prep. At that particular time, he was able to get into the Prep. And since when I came out of NYU, I had my phys ed degree, and I wanted to continue in coaching and so forth. So I went to the principal there, Brother Timothy, a great gentleman, a great Franciscan. I said, brother, I really want to get into being a teacher, and I want to get into coaching. I had no background in coaching, but I was a phys ed major from NYU, and I studied coaching and physical education activities at NYU, and so he says, okay, Coach, Vince will hire you, and you start in September for $3,000 a year, and I was very happy to have the job. And so I said, I'd also like to coach, but he said, that's very good. He said, love to have you as a coach, and you'll coach the JV team. That was $200 a year, just to give you some perspectives. But his passion of helping young people as a Christian leader was contagious within the school. And so I started, and I had a great opportunity. I was the JV coach at St. Francis. And so what I did is I worked along with a couple of gentlemen, Brother Jack Capper, who was very helpful at the time. He was in the religious order, the Franciscans, and he was my assistant. So we got together and he did a lot of things that we thought were correct. And we started to study, how do you put a team together? How do you put an offense, a defense? And so I did that for 2 years, and I did that mostly coaching from the Notre Dame book of football at that time. Frank Leahy was the head coach at Notre Dame, and they ran the T formation. So we got his book. I think I may still have it home, and we started to read it and